We are often told that the defining trait of a brilliant mind is the ability to decide instantly. In primitive environments, instantly categorizing every input into a strict binary, friend or foe, success or failure, kept us alive. Modern corporate and social structures still heavily reward this primitive reflex. They mistake a rapid, rigid judgment for executive competence. But we have to ask whether this relentless black-and-white processing is actually a sign of clarity or simply a symptom of a brain completely overwhelmed by data. What our culture praises as strong decisiveness is frequently an evolutionary shortcut. It is a defense mechanism designed to avoid the exhausting work of deep analytical processing. The alternative is a computational model we can call cognitive grayness. Cognitive grayness is the mental bandwidth required to hold contradictory models simultaneously, without forcing premature resolution.
To see why this matters, we need to run a systemic stress test, comparing the primitive binary model against the grayness model. We will test them across 3 specific variables. First is ambiguous data, second is moral friction, and finally, intellectual pushback. The true metric of advanced cognition isn't how fast you categorize the world. It's how long you tolerate its inherent contradictions. Consider a common piece of ambiguous data. Your manager reads an urgent message from you and does not reply. This diagram shows how the binary brain immediately forces a conclusion to resolve the unknown, locking into a strict assumption like, "They are dissatisfied with my work." Psychologists call this reflex the need for cognitive closure, or NFC. NFC is a metric that measures an individual's desire for a firm, immediate answer to a question and their deep aversion toward ambiguity. Systems operating at lower cognitive tiers exhibit a high NFC. They must shut down ambiguity immediately to alleviate processing anxiety, trading accuracy for a false sense of security. In contrast, a parallel processing model actively suspends multiple conflicting probabilities. Perhaps the manager is driving, perhaps they are in a meeting, or perhaps they just need time to think, without locking into a single one. Keeping these multiple, unverified pathways open requires immense background processing power. This computational load is exactly why it exhausts lower-tier cognitive systems. The author F. Scott Fitzgerald observed this structural difference in human intelligence nearly a century ago. He noted that the test of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold 2 opposed ideas in the mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function. Premature cognitive closure relieves immediate psychological anxiety, but it permanently blinds the analytical system to the actual complexities of the real world. Our second variable is moral friction, best observed during public scandals or mass internet outrage. A rigid system defends cheap justice. It argues that rapid public condemnation efficiently enforces social boundaries and isolates bad actors. This relies heavily on the affective heuristic. The affective heuristic is a mental shortcut where people make decisions based on their current emotions rather than objective data. Moral outrage is an emotional reflex, not an analytical process. This heuristic floods the brain with a surge of dopamine and a feeling of moral superiority, which acts as a complete kill switch for deeper systemic thinking. The alternative is what we can call the Spinoza protocol, named after the philosopher Baruch Spinoza, whose strict rule was to neither laugh at human actions nor curse them, but to understand them. A high cognition system actively suppresses the affective heuristic. Instead issuing a label, it traces the invisible, multivariable chain of environmental and historical causes that produced the bad actor in the first place. By mapping this causal chain, the system identifies the actual structural bugs that allowed the failure, rather than blindly reacting to the symptoms. Moral judgment is a low-effort emotional reward. Causal mapping is the rigorous, unglamorous work of true problem-solving. The final stress test variable is intellectual pushback, how a system handles direct contradiction. The rigid view dictates that fiercely defending your worldview is required to maintain logical consistency and system integrity. This model shows ego-defensive bandwidth allocation. When identity is tightly bound to an idea, contradicting that idea registers as a literal, physical threat to the biological system. This defensive reaction forces the brain to run on a single, overloaded thread. It destroys the capacity to process any new incoming information.
Advanced systems bypass this by practicing deselfing. Deselfing is the conscious decoupling of personal identity from external data streams. A decoupled system treats critique merely as data. It views the attack as a reflection of the challenger's internal state and biases, not as an attack on the self. Like water, a decoupled system absorbs impact without structural damage, enveloping the object and instantly returning to a calm surface. Shrinking the ego functions as a ruthless optimization strategy to preserve cognitive bandwidth. Binary heuristics were effective survival tools in the Pleistocene, but they fail in modern, high-complexity environments. Cognitive grayness provides a stable vantage point, a high-altitude perspective that allows you to observe human behavior without being entangled in it. Upgrading your cognitive capacity is never about winning arguments or dominating a debate. True intellectual evolution requires escaping the exhausting, endless loop of binary judgment. A mind that has fully accepted ambiguity and successfully decoupled its ego achieves a state of vast, frictionless observation. By embracing the gray, you stop fighting reality and finally free up the bandwidth required to truly perceive it.